So changes could be coming to the Chiefs that we haven't seen happen in quite some time, and while the focus is currently on the playoffs, several assistant coaches, including one of the greatest to ever do it, as well as Brett Veach's right-hand man, could find themselves moving on. So I've got to talk about that, Travis Kelce responding to being quote-unquote scared of the Bengals, the Titans getting worked over by Veach, and more. But first, how about those? First up, while 3 teams in the AFC West are in the playoffs, with the Broncos traveling to Buffalo this weekend to take on the Bills and the Chargers heading to Houston to play the Texans, the Raiders are once again looking for a new head coach. That's right. Yesterday it was announced that Antonio Pierce got fired after just his first full season as the team's head coach, but in the season and a half with the team, roughly season and a half with the team since he took over as the interim head coach during the 2023 season, he finished 9-17, and this year alone they went 4-13. So not great, but honestly, he wasn't really set up to succeed when they rolled into the season with Gardner Minshew as their quarterback and said, hey, AP, make this work. But as a Chiefs fan, I do not mind continued chaos in Vegas at this point in time. Honestly, Mark Davis and company may have decided to go in a different direction purely to find a head coach with more experience. Either way, while the Chiefs, Broncos, and Chargers prepare for the playoff push and obviously have winning records, the Raiders find themselves once again scrambling to hire their 7th head coach since 2012, 8th head coach if you count their interim after John Gruden got fired. Next up, Travis Kelce addressed the subject of the Chiefs purposely losing the game against the Broncos because they were scared of the Bengals and didn't want to let them in. But before I get to what he said, I do want to mention that Kelce won the Walter Payton Man of the Year Charity Challenge, which means he will receive a $35,000 donation to his foundation, 87 and running. An awesome accomplishment to somebody much well-deserved of that. He does great work in the Kansas City community, and Kelce was grateful and thankful for that, offering words of gratitude to the kingdom in a video before saying it's now time to focus on the playoffs, so he'll see him at Arrowhead. Well, Kelce also weighed in about the hilarious farce from the jobless little Johnnies that fabricated the lie that the Chiefs lost to the Broncos intentionally so that the 9-8 Bengals wouldn't make the playoffs. Well, for starters, before I get to what he said, even if the Bengals would have lost to the Steelers on Saturday, thus eliminating them from the playoffs one day earlier, KC would have still rested their starters and rolled out their 2nd and 3rd stringers. It's all about rest and getting out of the final week healthy with the 1 seed locked up regardless of that game's outcome. So with that out of the way, Kelce was not trying to hear any of that nonsense today on his podcast. He had multiple expletives in this tirade about it, saying he's not afraid of anybody in the playoffs ever.
I want to slay every dragon one by one, like Mortal Kombat. I don't even want this to be like we play the lowest seed. Just give me the best teams.
He continued saying he loves competing against the greatest, and the Bengals were playing well at the end of the season, so it would have been fun to have them in there. But nobody intentionally lost that game against Denver. He's fine to play whoever, whenever, whether it be the Walmart parking lot. He does not care. He also mentioned that nobody wanted to lose against the Broncos week 18 and stated the obvious. They got their asses kicked. Now, obviously, Andy Reid and company went ultra vanilla on both sides of the ball from a game plan perspective, and they played mainly their backups, so nobody was really expecting them to win. Now, it's worth noting that one of the defenders out there who played 25 or so snaps was linebacker Blake Lynch. He was the guy that the Chiefs signed to the practice squad just 6 days prior to playing in that game, and they signed him because the team wanted to give Nick Bolton and Drew Tranquill a chance to rest, and they needed the extra help at linebacker because you had an injury. Then Swayze Bozeman and Cole Christensen's practice squad elevations were maxed out. Well, he did a pretty good job, all things considered, talking about Blake Lynch, coming in as the highest graded defender out there per PFF, and the Chiefs basically said, hey, Blake, great job. We appreciate you. Now, best of luck for whatever comes next. Because yesterday, they actually terminated his practice squad contract after being there for roughly a week and opted to bring back wide receiver Montrell Washington in his stead. So Montrell Washington is back, a receiver that knows the system pretty well, being here for a couple of years, but he can also be used as a dependable punt or kick returner for the team if needs be. Speaking of returners, we will see what happens with Nico Remigio as well, because he's a guy that's on the 53-man roster right now, but McCole Hardman's 21-day window to return is opened up. So do the Chiefs bring McCole back and keep Nico on the roster, or do they waive Nico and hope he clears waivers so they can re-sign him to the practice squad where he's been for the majority of this season? I personally liked Remigio in the return game, thought he was a bit more aggressive than McCole, but if they opt to keep McCole around instead of both of them, it's got to be because the coaches think McCole can contribute more on the offense if needs be. We already know what he can contribute, being the fast, speedy guy he is on jet sweeps and stuff like that. Gadgety, niche roles on the offense, it's effective and it can work even though he doesn't play a lot of offense. We'll have to see what they end up deciding to do. And from here, I got to talk about the Chiefs' trades with the Titans only looking that much better. Some tough decisions ahead for the staff, as well as some underrated losses the team could sustain here very soon, which means changes are most likely coming. But before I get to that, with the regular season officially over, that means it's time to get ready for some playoff football, and we don't know exactly who the Chiefs are going to play until after Super Wildcard Weekend, but we do know the Chiefs will have home field advantage throughout the playoffs, and that is where my special hookup from today's sponsor, SeatGeek, comes in. Everyone can use my code HBTC10 and get 10% off any tickets on SeatGeek, whether you are a new customer or not. This includes Chiefs or any other NFL playoff games, as well as other sports, concerts, festivals, you name it. SeatGeek makes the process easy for you, rating tickets on a scale of 1 to 10, so just look for the green dots because those are the good ones. Meanwhile, stay away from the red. And no matter how many times you've bought tickets using SeatGeek before, code HBTC10 is going to get you 10% off your next order. So what are you waiting for? Take out your phone, open up the SeatGeek app, and add code HBTC10 to your account ASAP because this offer is only available for a limited time. All right, we have a little bit more news on the trades the Chiefs made with the Titans this past season. They made a couple of them, and things only look better for Kansas City now that the regular season reached its end. For starters, when the Chiefs traded L'Jarius Sneed to the Titans for that 2025 third-round pick, none of us knew it would end up being one of the first picks in the third round. The Titans finished the season with the worst record in football, along with the Giants and Browns, who all went 3-14. So the Chiefs officially get the second pick of the third round for a complex rotational reason that I didn't really fully understand until today. When teams have the same record, they rotate draft picks in these early parts of the rounds. It's very odd, but KC is going to get a very early round third pick for L'Jarius Sneed. And it doesn't end there, because when the Chiefs traded for DeAndre Hopkins prior to the trade deadline, the 2025 fifth-round pick they gave up for him could turn into a fourth-round pick if he played 60% of the snaps in the regular season and in the Super Bowl. Well, he only played 49% of the offensive snaps in the regular season, so that means the trade remains a fifth-round pick rather than converting into a fourth. Brett Veach absolutely cooked, put his chef hat on, and sauteed on these two moves with the Titans. Yes, Sneed was great last year, much respect to him, but he spent most of this year on injured reserve or just injured in general. He only played in 5 games the entire season. And speaking of cornerbacks, Trent McDuffie is one who I think got snubbed from the NFLPA's third annual Players All-Pro list. I mean, I can't be too upset about it because this was voted on by players across the league, and both PS2 and Derek Stingley Jr. are incredible cornerbacks as well. However, defensive tackle Chris Jones made the list alongside Jalen Carter because Chris Jones is one of the best to ever do it. Then on offense, you had center Creed Humphrey and left guard Joe Thuney selected for the Chiefs as well, so congrats to those guys. It's not the official All-Pro list, but the NFLPA's version of it voted on by the players. But I want to keep the train rolling here about Trent McDuffie because even though he got snubbed, in my opinion, from that list, he is eligible to sign an extension with the team starting whenever. In fact, all of the 2022 draft class for any team can now get extensions done. And while KC most likely waits until their playoff run is over before worrying about any of that, I think Trent McDuffie could really become the first defensive back KC's drafted that they signed to an extension since Eric Berry. McDuffie's one of the best corners in the NFL. There's a bunch of metrics to back that up. I explained that in more detail in a video last week, and that's why it makes sense for KC to keep him around, but if they do, it is going to cost them some fat cash. Pat Surtain II reached a 4-year, $96 million extension with $77.5 million guaranteed with the Denver Broncos at the beginning of this season, and I would imagine McDuffie would be wanting something similar or at least in the ballpark. It might not be quite as much as that, but it's going to be pretty close. Either way, there's a lot of decisions the team will need to make in that regard because aside from McDuffie, you've got George Karlaftis, Brian Cook, Leo Chanel, Joshua Williams, Jalen Watson, and Isaiah Pacheco from that draft class who have all played meaningful snaps for the team over the years. On top of that, heavy hitters like Nick Bolton and Trey Smith are set to hit free agency here soon, amongst a bunch of other players. I'm going to cover that in a later video. There's plenty of time to talk about it, but it's safe to say the Chiefs have a lot of decisions to make here very soon. KC might also be without one of their key decision makers on staff, as well as maybe their offensive coordinator this offseason. Matt Nagy reportedly had a virtual interview today with the New York Jets for their head coach opening, and Chiefs assistant GM Mike Borganzi also interviewed for the GM opening over there with the Jets. Borganzi, in case you didn't know, has been with the Chiefs for 16 seasons, working his way up the chain over the years, and currently supervises and directs their college and professional scouting operations. So he plays a big role in the draft, as well as supporting and advising GM Brett Veach with roster management via free agency, waiver claims, and trades. He's basically Veach's right-hand man, and while that would be a pretty big loss for KC, the Jets would probably do well to hire him. Borgonzi has been part of arguably the most well-ran organization in the NFL from a year-to-year basis, at least over the last 10 or so years. Meanwhile, the Jets have probably been the worst. Polar opposites. They have the longest playoff drought in the NFL for a reason, after all. Diana Rossini of The Athletic, though, also reported that the Titans requested an interview with Mike Borganzi, so it's looking a bit more likely that he does indeed end up leaving this offseason from the Chiefs to one of these other teams, which is a pretty underrated loss for the Chiefs, in my opinion. He's a name you don't hear a lot about, but again, he's Brett Veach's right-hand man and has his hands in a lot of areas for the Chiefs and how they build these rosters. And while I would be happy for him if he was able to move on, as would Brett Veach and company, whoever backfills that assistant GM role for the Chiefs has some pretty big shoes to fill if Borganzi does indeed move on. Now, regarding Matt Nagy, I have no idea if he will actually get the job for the Jets, considering how many candidates New York is interviewing. And you can say what you want about Nagy, but he brought the Bears to their first playoff appearance in 8 years when he was a head coach for them. Then he did it again 2 years later with Mitch Trubisky at quarterback. His time there obviously didn't end well. He came back to KC for a reason, to kind of rebuild his image. And while he's not a fan favorite here in KC, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get another head coaching opportunity, if not for the Jets, maybe another team here sooner rather than later. I'm personally never really too high or too low on offensive coordinators here in KC as long as Andy Reid is here, because he quite literally runs the show on offense, and there's zero debate about that. Now, if Nagy does leave, that begs the question, who would be the next offensive coordinator for the Chiefs? I would love to see somebody fresh brought in, maybe a young guy with some new ideas to bounce off of Andy, but that is easier said than done. Andy typically likes to promote from within, so maybe Joe Bleymaier, the pass game coordinator, who was previously the team's wide receiver coach, and then before that was their pass game analyst / assistant QB's coach, he could be a possibility to get promoted from within. Something else Andy likes to do is bring back in familiar faces that he knows and trusts, similar to Matt Nagy, and so I wouldn't be completely surprised if Doug Peterson found his way back to Kansas City. Again, if Nagy moves on. Peterson was most recently the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and as many of you know by now, he got fired at the end of their regular season. It did not end well, to say the least, but he would be a potential powerhouse to bring in as the OC for a couple of reasons. He was previously the offensive coordinator with the Chiefs from 2013 to 2015, but then got hired on as the head coach of the Eagles, winning a Super Bowl with them in 2018 before being let go a couple seasons later, where he then was the head coach of the Jags for the last few seasons. So he certainly would come in with a bunch of experience, and that's probably his greatest quality. Then, of course, there's also the possible return of Eric Bieniemy. A lot of people have been asking for him to return every single week this season in the comments, but I honestly don't know what to make of EB at this point in time. He went from KC to be the OC of the Commanders, coaching there for a year before getting let go after they finished the season as the 25th scoring offense. He then went to UCLA and got let go from them after the team averaged just 18.4 points per game. Bieniemy's agent, though, said the parting of ways was mutual, as the plan has always been for EB to return to coaching in the NFL. Well, the offense certainly operated at a higher efficiency for KC from a statistical standpoint, multiple statistical standpoints, but who knows what the future holds for EB at this point in time, and honestly, who knows if Matt Nagy even finds himself somewhere else next season. We will certainly find out one way or another once the season comes to an end for KC. Hopefully it ends in a three-peat, but for now, everybody has their eyes on the wildcard weekend to see who they end up playing in the divisional round of the playoffs at Arrowhead. I would think it's the Chargers, but crazier things have happened before. And if that wasn't enough, the Jets also reportedly, as of today, are requesting an interview with Chiefs defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo for their head coaching spot. Obviously, he's one of the best defensive coordinators in the game. He could arguably be the first assistant coach coordinator that makes the Hall of Fame because of how many Super Bowls he has won with multiple teams. But this is something I would not like to see happen selfishly because he has been a huge part of the success in Kansas City. Now, Spags was asked a couple weeks ago in a presser, maybe even last week, if he ever desired to be a head coach once again. He had a stint with the Rams a while back, and that did not go well, but that wasn't really a scenario for anybody to be able to succeed in. So I do hope he gets a second chance. And Spags himself said in that presser, yes, I do have aspirations to be a head coach again, but that is a topic for another time because I'm focused on the here and now and helping my team win. So this would be a huge loss if Spags ended up going elsewhere, and that's something that I believe has really helped with the Chiefs' success year in and year out, is the continuity in the coaching staff staying around. Andy Reid on the offensive side of the ball, Spags on the defensive side of the ball. A lot of these teams that make the playoffs, make the Super Bowl, just anywhere deep playoff runs and have a lot of success, their assistant coaches end up going elsewhere. Think of the Eagles. After the Chiefs beat them in the Super Bowl, they lost both coordinators after that game, OC and DC. So it's been an underrated part of the Chiefs' success. That's why I kind of titled the video what I did. A lot of changes could potentially be coming for the Kansas City Chiefs. They would be in some uncharted waters that they haven't been in for years just because of being able to keep most of their coaching staff, their core unit intact. Now, somebody who's been intact, part of the Chiefs coaching staff for quite a few years, is going to be defensive backs coach Dave Merritt. And this is what he had to say about Spags and a head coaching opportunity. He said Spags will create a winning culture unlike no other if he's selected as a head coach. I've been with him for 11 years. I've witnessed it firsthand. And it's worth mentioning that the request for Steve Spagnuolo to interview, we're not done today because another team threw his name into the mix, and that's going to be the Raiders. Diana Rossini of The Athletic said the Raiders are requesting an interview with Chiefs defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo for their head coaching spot per sources. Please, God, no. No thank you. Would not like that one bit. Obviously, would be happy for him to elevate himself, but to see him in the AFC West against a team that he would know inside and out, good God almighty, please and no thanks. So this offseason, we could maybe see several key pieces moving on and moving elsewhere. Offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, assistant GM in Mike Borganzi. Let me know your thoughts on that. Spags, Nagy, Borgonzi, who you think could potentially replace them. We've got the playoffs to focus on, but the offseason is right around the corner. So let me know your thoughts on all that in the comments down below. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?